Hello guys, this is Nitin Chauhan. Today I am here to delivering a new topic that is called inflation. Thank you so much for viewing my previous lesson. So this is inflation 2.1. I will deliver the complete series of the inflation 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3. Under this series, we will study the following contents. We will study about the inflation. We will study about the type of the inflation. We will study about the cost-based inflation and the type of the inflation. Rate-based inflation. What are the costs? We will study in cost-based inflation. And what are the rate-based inflation? Which is inflation which is applied at the specific rate. That is called rate-based inflation. And we will study cause of demand pull inflation. We will study cause of cost push inflation. And what are the impact of the both of the inflation on the economy? And what are the impact on the inflation on the investment? We will study in this complete series. But remember, for this series we will study on this lesson about inflation, about type of the inflation, about cost based inflation, about rate based inflation. We will study in our next series. So we will study in this complete topic, this thing. Okay. So what is inflation? When we talk about inflation, what comes in our mind first? It always studies that it is rise. It is right. What? Journal level of price of the commodity and services. What is the meaning of journal level of price of the commodity? The price of the commodity is higher for not only only one person, for everyone. We are able to buy service or commodity at higher price for not only for me or not only for the single person. It will be for the everyone for the long period of time. It will be happen for the long period of time, not for the 1 hour or 3 hours for the day. It will be for the long period of time. So it will be called inflation, right? So what happen when inflation occurs? It means to say price goes up. So what happened? So each unit of currency or money which through we can buy a single quantity or less quantity, because there the purchasing power of money goes down. We purchase goods and services, and the inflation also affect the purchasing power, as I have told you, for the currency and the consumers, right? So the price of the commodity is determined in many ways. It depends upon the types of market, right? So when we talk about types of market, there are two types of market. First is called producers market. Second is called competitive markets. Competitive markets is a market which is, in other word said, it is fully competitive markets, where the numerous buyers and numerous sellers compete to each other, where the price of the commodity is determined on the basis of demand and supply. That is called market force, which is based on market force. The price of the commodity will determine on the basis of how much it is demanded and how much quantity has been produced as a sale. So that will be called market force. So demand and supply when intersect to each other, that position, at what position demand and supply will intersect to each other, at that point there will be determined the price of the commodity in a competitive markets. The producers market is that market, it refers to the imperfect market. It is an imperfect market. In this market, producer takes decision determining price of the commodity. It means that the producer will decide what will be the price of the commodity for the consumers. And variation in the price of the commodity also change the condition of market, right? If their commodity will be available on a higher price, then definitely the consumer will not be able to get that commodity as a same, right? So variation is the price of goods, one goods and various goods. So only rise in the price of one goods may or may not be considered as large part of inflation. It will not be called a large part of inflation, because if I go to market and own a specific shop, and that shop is providing me some kind of goods at a higher rate, but the same goods I can buy from the another shop, so it is meaning not that for that shop I have it is inflation. It will not be considered as inflation. Inflation will be considered when the price of the commodity will be same for all, right? So rise in a price of many goods for long period of time can be said as inflation. The rise, say an example we can take of the commodity. If the rise in a price of the commodity is for the long period of time and for the everyone, so that will be called the long period of the inflation, right? So now we talk about types of inflation. So how many types or kinds of inflation? So we can divide it two parts. The first is the cost based inflation, and second is rate based inflation, right? So cost based inflation, which is having something cause. Inflation is occur with because of something cause. So cause may be demand. So because of the huge demand of the people for buying a single unit or many goods, cause a inflation, right? So thus it is called demand pull inflation, because the demand pulls the inflation. And second could be the cost push inflation. The inflation is occur just because of cost increasing of direct cost and indirect cost, right? And pricing power inflation, okay? Sectoral inflation, this is the cost based inflation. These are cost based inflation. And now we talk about second types of inflation, that is rate based inflation. Rate based inflation under creeping inflation, trotting inflation, hyperinflation, galloping inflation, jumping inflation. So galloping and jumping and hopping inflation, these are same inflation, okay? So this kind of inflation we will study in our next class, next lesson. We will not complete this in this series, this lesson, okay? So now we talk about what is demand pull inflation. I have told you that what is demand pull inflation. When total demand of the commodity and services exceed the total supply of the goods and services, that will be called the demand pull inflation. I have easily told you that the demand pulls the inflation. The inflation is occurring just because of excess demand. Demand when will be excess? When our resources are limited, and when our resources have been fully used and we have produced a limited quantity of the commodity, and even the demand is not fulfilled by the commodity, that situation will be called excess demand, right? So it will be cause of excess demand. That will be called demand pull inflation. So what happened in demand pull inflation? In a market, when supply of goods and services less, then obviously price of those goods and services rises. I told you it's already. So it's leading the situation of demand pull inflation, okay? So remember that the demand pull inflation affects the market economy in an inverse relationship during the wartime, okay? So what is next type of inflation? That is cost push inflation. So what is cost push inflation? When we find there is an economy cost of production very high for the goods and services. What is cost? We know very well it is the sum of direct cost and indirect cost. We find direct cost has been increased. We find raw material prices increase. We find the machinery prices increase. So thus this will be called the inflation due to the direct cost increasing, due to increase in indirect cost. So that kind of inflation is called cost push inflation, right? So it can be because of wages rate, increase in wages rate. People are not ready to work in as a wage rate which was earlier, and increase in a price of raw material, which I have told you. So the both of the example is direct cost or indirect cost. So these above point automatically will increase the price of the final goods, or we can say the cost of the final goods. Then obviously the producer will want to get profit, because the producer produced the commodity for getting profit motive. So if he will not get profit, he will not produce the commodity. If he wants to produce the commodity, obviously he will increase the price, so getting the profit, right? So example, high rate of petrol leads the cost pull inflation, because the petrol is a such kind of resources which is used in many industry and which affect the industry at a large level, right? So this is cost push inflation. And why now we talk about pricing power inflation. Here is the pricing power. What is the pricing power? So this type of inflation occurs when group of big producer which produce commodity as large level decide to increase their product price for saving their profit margin. Profit margin when decrease, when the direct cost of the commodity producing and indirect cost of the producing commodity increase, then definitely producer will not be able to get profit as earlier. So the producer decide to increase the price of the commodity, and that commodity is sold in a economy as a large level. Okay. So this type of inflation is called administrated price inflation. Administrated price means here's some group of people decided to increase the price of specific good. Remember, price power inflation does not occur at the time of economic depression, financial crisis, right? So this type of inflation called oligopolic inflation. Oligopolic is a situation of the market where the number of the seller is a limited, and who creates the product at a large level, because the oligopoly has the power of determine their price of goods. So they can determine their price for seeming their profit margin. So example of the price administrated price inflation. Example, we can take the price of car, increase in price of car. It occurs due to increase in inputs like cost of steel, like plastic, like right. So thus, to save their profit margin, company has to rise their price of goods. Okay. So next is a sectoral inflation. What is sectoral inflation? Sectoral means a specific sector. So it occurs when the increase in a price, it occurs when the increase in the price of commodity and services which provided by a certain sector of industry. For example, we can take increase in airfare. Why the airfare increase? Due to increase in the cost of crude oil, because crude oil having the basic source of all oil industries. So it has been increased the ticket fare, right? So this kind of inflation is called sectoral inflation. So thank you so much for watching this lesson. Subscribe this channel for more awesome lesson. Like this lesson if you want, find valuable in any manner. It will help me, it will inspire me to do something better for everyone. Thank you so much.